Hi everyone, Laszlo Byro here with Rhyme Signatures, the nerdiest music review this side of creating one of the most famous and oft-used writing utensils in the world around 85 years ago. And today we're going to be doing a review of the new Thy Catafalque album, Alföld. I'm going to be the first to say it, but I don't really know a whole lot of anything really about Hungary. I mean, I can point at it on a map, I can tell you that the capital city is Budapest, and that the national dish is gulyás. But other than that, I'm sadly ignorant of their ways, their culture, and their history for the most part, and have no idea how to pronounce a single word of it. You have been warned. But with that taken in mind, I do feel like I know a fair bit about Thy Catafalque, who have the honour of being pretty much the only Hungarian band that I listen to, although if this country is hiding other such gems from me, please do let me know about it. Primarily serving as the solo project of multi-instrumentalist, songwriter and producer Tamás Kitaj, Thy Catafalque have been around for a decent little while now, making their debut in the late 90s with Sublunary Tragedies. And Kitaj has been pumping out records with an efficient regularity since 2016's Meta, which is also, coincidentally enough, where I first discovered his work. Meta remains one of my all-time favourite albums, a surefire hit for all seasons, and contains one of the best 20-plus minute long epics you're ever likely to hear in the form of Malmok Jarnak. It very much put the band on the map for me, and I subsequently ended up anticipating each new release with a not inconsiderable amount of excitement. 2018's Geometria, 2020's Naive, and 2021's Vadak have all satisfied different parts of my musical appetites over the past few years, but none have quite satisfied in the same way that Meta did. Now, I appreciate a great deal how each Thy Catafalque record has managed to bring something new and satisfying to Kitaj's musical CV. But in the same breath, there's been this undeniably distinctive through line to everything, a footprint that marks out each record as being distinctly his. I've certainly enjoyed the more electronic-focused albums of recent times, but I've been getting more in the mood for a dirtier, heavier, more aggressive and metallic Thy Catafalque. So, will my appetites be satisfied at last, and does Alföld hold a candle to the considerable legacy that the band has built up until this point? Now, of course, the answer is never quite as simple as a yes or a no, so let's take a little look under the hood. This is definitely the heaviest record they've made since Meta, and there's more than a little throwback to their avant-garde post-black metal roots, particularly on the first 3 tracks. The riffs are back in force, the vocals are angry, aggressive and rasping in their intensity, and everything moves along at a particularly snappy tempo. Ashend Hegyi kicks things off nicely with some dank mosh pit filling riffing and some of the most demonic vocals we've had from Kitaj in quite some time. It's a refreshing throwback to the band I initially fell in love with, and makes for a welcome change of pace to the much softer albums that came before this one. The third track of Alföld Egyenyo is where my attention is particularly grabbed, as we enter a slightly newer territory for Thy Catafalque. The heaviness is very much intact here, but it's the thrash-inspired grooves and melodies that really make this track stand out. The doomy, gloomy and boomy tracks that preceded this are very much safer offerings as far as the band's creativity is concerned, which is honestly fine, but compared to how excellently the record evolves, they feel a little bit pedestrian compared to songs like this. It was hard for me not to nod my head and grin like a lunatic whilst headbanging around my room to this one. The keyboards woven into the back half of the soaring clean vocals are easily amongst my favourite moments on the record, along with the pure 80s cheese of the guitar tone and soloing. It's a lot of fun, and it's quite refreshing to hear Kitaj really let loose and shred. The nearly 10-minute long title track is absolutely the centrepiece of this record though, and showcases the range of Kitaj's talent and fluidity of songwriting as he effortlessly moves from mood to mood, genre to genre, and perfectly demonstrates why I will always be excited to hear new music from him. In a lot of ways, this feels like a much longer song, but with everything compacted into a much smaller space, as this really does go to a lot of different places over the course of its runtime. Deep, sonorous guitar work and machine gun drumming gives way to sinister, barely human growling early on, but by the time the song ends, you'll have forgotten that it was even part of the same track as what you're listening to. The midway point, with its psychedelic grooves, glorious, haunting female vocals, and riff-centric passages, is excellent, showcasing that Katai is a phenomenally talented guitarist, capable of holding his own against some of the best in the business, fully capable of balancing blistering technical flourishes with intense grooves and melody-rich delivery. There's even space for some Mike Oldfield-inspired acoustic guitar work towards the end. Given as this is most assuredly the peak of the album, how does everything else that follows hold up? Pretty well, to be honest. The one thing that I will always appreciate about Thy Catafalque is that they never really see the point or purpose in trying to one-up themselves. There's never a feeling where you think the band are saying, "You thought that was crazy, just wait until the next one." You know, they've managed to find a distinctly nuanced balance between letting each song breathe within its own space, while simultaneously making everything work together in a kind of beautiful musical harmony. The flute work in Ffolianda, sitting on top of the thick, satisfying bass grooves, is inspired, once again making you wonder where on earth the early black and doom metal of the first few tracks has gone off to. But still, it feels like this is the same band, the same voice and the same inspiration running through its core. At the halfway point, we segue into more electronic sounds that bring back some memories of Verdak and Naiv. It's punctuated nicely with some intricate violin work, which overall really does mark out Ffolianda as one of the more instrumentally creative tracks on the album. Sheila Got Gergeto kicks off with a sombre, monotone, near Gregorian chant before we blast back into these very post-metal inspired wall of sound guitars. There's a great sense of almost being lifted out of your feet in this track, kind of reminding me of like mid-2010s The Ocean at times. The guitar is very much the superstar on this track, moving away from the multi-instrumental grooves of Ffolianda, but also showcasing even more variety in Katai's vocals. If anything, I would say this album is probably one of Thy Catafalque's most impressive from a vocal perspective. The range that is displayed across the album's runtime is honestly shocking at times, and really does make me appreciate how much talent this man has. A Fakello Hold Osaga feels more of a throwback to the earlier moments of the album, but with maybe slightly lighter tone. The vocals, while aggressive, aren't quite diving to the same depths of the human vocal range though. It's a fine enough track, but I do feel this is one of the weaker, more by-the-numbers offerings on Alföld. I'm similarly not as enamoured with the final track of Nima Vermek, and I'm especially not fond of how abruptly the song and consequently the album ends. Now, I've no issues with a sharp stop, but the track ends in the middle of what feels like a riff that's just getting going. I genuinely thought my streaming service was playing silly buggers with me for a while until I heard it again on my second playthrough. Honestly, I think my biggest criticism about the record would be that it has a comparatively weak beginning and end. The opening pair of tracks are a little generic progressive black metal, and the final curtain just feels like a bit of a retread of this. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still perfectly great music, certain to scratch the itch of those who've got a craving for this sound, but taken under Thy Catafalque's somewhat exacting standards, it is a little bit weak, especially when you compare it to the frankly stunning 4-track run in the middle of the album. The record is also remarkably brief for a Thy Catafalque record, coming in at just shy of 44 minutes. Now, while I've always been a proponent of a record's perfect length generally falling into this sort of time frame, Thy Catafalque have always managed to justify their previous extended runtimes. Verdak was 62 minutes, Meta was 66, Geometria was 56, I mean sure, Naive was also around 47 minutes long, but I did feel that that felt a little bit on the short side as well. Thy Catafalque are one of those bands where I crave their long-form content, and I love when Katai just gets lost in what he's doing and brings these massive, epic, sweeping statement records. For better or worse, depending on how you feel about this, Alföld is a much more succinct, more immediate and direct record. So, what else can I say about Thy Catafalque's Alföld? This is definitely a strong record, and one I've been having a really good time with. The middle portion of the album is especially good and contains some of my favourite tracks from the band since Meta. The only frustrations I really have with it are that some of the more direct, less experimental tracks do feel like they're playing it a teensy bit safe. They're following a more established playbook and not pushing the envelope in terms of creativity like I've come to expect from the band. As I say though, this could be precisely what you're looking for. Perhaps you've found previous albums from the Catafalque to be a little bit too avant-garde and esoteric, which honestly is an absolutely fair criticism, and I would 100% understand if you've not been as enamoured with them due to this. It may very well be that Alföld is the record for you. It's a lot more direct, a lot more upfront with what it's doing, and honestly at times can tend to just be a pretty darn rockin' black metal album. Recommendation is to definitely at least buy yourself a digital copy of this one, guys. It's a very good record, but it falls ever so slightly short of being a great one for me. I'm still having a lot of fun with this one though, but Meta remains safely at the top of the pile for at least one more album cycle. This is all, of course, my opinion, guys, as you know, so if you have listened to this record, please tell me what you thought about it in the comments down below. If you did like this video, please do share it around with anyone else who you think would possibly enjoy it, and please do consider subscribing to the channel for more content. If you really like what I do as well, please do consider clicking the coffee link in the description box down below to help support the channel. And until next time, guys, keep your rhyme signatures very odd.